The eviction notice was taped to the door when Maya Reeves came home from her third shift. Bright orange paper screaming in official typeface that she had 72 hours to vacate the premises, or the sheriff would remove her belongings to the curb. Her 6-year-old son, Ethan, stood beside her holding his backpack, staring at the paper like it was a monster he didn't know how to fight. Maya's hand shook as she pulled the notice down. She'd known this was coming. 3 months behind on rent, working double shifts at the plastics factory and weekend mornings at the gas station, but the math never worked.
If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today.
$847 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment with water stains on the ceiling and roaches in the kitchen. $120 a week for childcare so she could work. $200 for groceries if she was careful. $85 for the bus pass because her car died 6 months ago and she couldn't afford to fix it. The numbers didn't add up. They never added up. And now they'd run out of time. "Mommy, are we going to be homeless?" Ethan's voice was small, trying to be brave the way 6-year-olds do when they know something terrible is happening, but don't understand the full weight of it. Maya knelt down, ignoring the ache in her knees from standing on concrete floors for 8 hours. "No, baby, we're going to figure something out. We always do." But she didn't know how. Not this time. She'd already borrowed money from everyone she could ask. Her sister had helped twice, but had 3 kids of her own. Her mother was on disability, living in assisted housing. Ethan's father had disappeared 2 years ago, leaving nothing but an empty checking account and a note saying he couldn't do this anymore. Inside the apartment, Maya sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a stack of bills that looked like an accusation. No matter how she rearranged the numbers, they spelled the same thing: failure. She was 28 years old, working 60 hours a week and still losing. The American dream felt like a lie told to people who didn't know better, who believed hard work and determination mattered more than luck and privilege and being born into families that could help when things fell apart. The knock came at 7 p.m. Maya almost didn't answer, afraid it was the landlord coming to discuss the eviction. Maybe offer to let her stay if she'd just sign over her last paycheck. But something made her open the door. A woman stood in the hallway, maybe 60, wearing a gray suit that looked expensive but worn, like quality that had seen better decades. She carried a leather briefcase that had been repaired in several places, the kind of object someone kept because it mattered, not because it was pretty. "Maya Reeves?" "Yes." "My name is Catherine Walsh. I'm an attorney. I represent the estate of Roland Kavanaugh." Maya blinked. The name meant nothing. "I don't know anyone by that name." Catherine's expression softened. "He was your mother's uncle, technically your great-uncle. He passed away 3 weeks ago. May I come in?" Maya hesitated, then stepped aside. Ethan was watching cartoons in the living room, his back to them. Catherine set her briefcase on the kitchen table and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Mr. Kavanaugh lived in isolation for most of his adult life. He owned property in Redstone County, about 150 miles west of here. A salt mine, specifically. He inherited it from his father in 1967 and worked it until 1994, when it was condemned by the state. Maya's confusion must have shown on her face because Catherine continued gently. "According to his will, executed in 2019 and updated 6 months ago, you are his sole beneficiary. He left you the mine, the mineral rights, and 287 acres of surrounding land. Why me? I never met him. I don't even remember my mother mentioning him." Catherine pulled out a photograph. An old man, maybe 80, with kind eyes and a weathered face, standing in front of a massive industrial building. "He followed your life from a distance. Your mother sent him updates before she passed. He knew about your struggles, about Ethan, about Your ex-husband leaving, he said in his letter to me that you reminded him of himself, someone who kept fighting even when the world made it impossible. She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Maya's name was written on the front in shaky handwriting. Maya opened it carefully. The letter inside was written on lined paper, the kind from a spiral notebook, in that same unsteady hand. Maya, you don't know me, but I've known about you for years. I made mistakes in my life, big ones. I let fear control me. I let secrets bury me alive. I spent 50 years hiding from the world in that mine, and it nearly destroyed me. But I found something down there, something extraordinary, something I was too afraid to tell anyone about, because I thought they'd take it from me. I thought they'd prove I was just a crazy old man who'd spent too long in the dark. Now I'm dying and I realize I was wrong. The secret wasn't protecting me, it was killing me. Just like your struggles are killing you now, slowly, one shift at a time, one unpaid bill after another. So I'm giving you the mine, not because you're family, though you are, but because you're strong enough to handle what's down there, strong enough to not let it destroy you the way it almost destroyed me. There's a chamber 800 feet below the surface. The old maps don't show it because I sealed it off in 1987 when I found it. I've never told anyone. You'll know it when you see it. Don't let them scare you away. The mine is condemned, but it's not dangerous. Not if you're careful. Not if you're brave. You deserve better than what life has given you. We both did. Now you have a chance to take it. Roland Maya read the letter 3 times, her heart hammering. A condemned mine, a hidden chamber. It sounded like the beginning of a horror movie, not a solution to her problems. Catherine pulled out more documents. Property deeds, survey maps, inspection reports from 1994 showing structural concerns and safety violations that led to the condemnation. The mine had been sealed by state order. No entry permitted without proper authorization and engineering assessment. Can I sell it? Maya heard herself ask. The land, the mineral rights, whatever. You can try. Catherine's tone suggested she'd expected this question, but condemned property is difficult to move. The mine itself is worthless without significant investment to make it operational again. The land is rocky, not suitable for farming or development. You might get $5,000 to $10,000 from someone willing to take a gamble on the mineral rights. Maya felt hope crumble. $5,000 wouldn't even cover her back rent and moving costs. However, Catherine continued, Mr. Kavanaugh prepaid all property taxes through 2030, so you own it free and clear. You could live there if you wanted. The surface buildings are old but structurally sound, according to the last assessment. Live in a condemned mine. Maya almost laughed, with a 6-year-old, but then she looked at the eviction notice on her refrigerator, at the bills covering her kitchen table, at Ethan watching cartoons, oblivious to how close they were to losing everything. What choice did she have? I need to see it, Maya said. Before I decide anything, I need to see this place. Catherine nodded. I'll arrange it. But Ms. Reeves, you should know that Mr. Kavanaugh's death wasn't entirely natural. He had cancer, yes, but he also had defensive wounds on his hands, bruises that suggest someone was with him in his final days. The police investigated briefly but found no evidence of foul play. Maya's blood went cold. Someone hurt him, or someone wanted information. Catherine's expression was grave. Mr. Kavanaugh's neighbors reported seeing strangers around his property in the weeks before his death. Men in expensive vehicles asking questions about the mine, about what Roland might have hidden there. Do you think there's really something down there? Something valuable? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. I think Roland Kavanaugh spent 30 years guarding a secret. I think men in expensive vehicles don't waste time on worthless property. And I think if there is something down there, You need to be very careful about who you trust.
If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this.
She handed Maya a key ring with 3 brass keys, one for the main gate, one for the office building, one for the elevator shaft access. The elevator itself doesn't work anymore, but there's a maintenance ladder. Catherine stood, gathering her documents. The property is yours as of tomorrow when the transfer papers file. I'd recommend going this weekend. The weather forecast is clear. Take supplies, flashlights, water. And Maya, her voice dropped, if you find what I think is down there, call me before you tell anyone else. After Catherine left, Maya sat in the dark kitchen holding those 3 brass keys and her dead great-uncle's letter. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch, thumb in his mouth the way he did, when he was stressed, even though he was getting too old for it. She looked at her son and thought about the choices people make when they're desperate, about driving 150 miles to explore a condemned mine because a dying stranger thought there might be treasure buried in the dark, about risking everything on the hope that life could be different. The smart thing would be to sell the property for whatever she could get. Take the $5,000 and use it to move somewhere cheaper. Start over. Keep grinding until she collapsed or got lucky or Ethan grew up and had his own struggles. But Maya was tired of smart choices that led nowhere, tired of working herself to death for an apartment she couldn't afford, and a life that felt like drowning in slow motion. Roland said she was strong enough. Maybe it was time to find out if he was right. That night, after Ethan was asleep, Maya called in sick to her factory shift. First time in 8 months. Then she packed 2 backpacks with everything they'd need for a weekend trip. Clothes, snacks, flashlights, first aid kit, water bottles, Ethan's favorite stuffed dog named Captain. She withdrew the last $200 from her checking account and filled the neighbor's car with gas after promising to have it back by Sunday. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was 70 and barely drove anymore. She asked no questions, just handed over the keys with a knowing look that said she understood what it meant when someone was running out of options. They left at dawn on Friday. Ethan slept in the back seat. Captain clutched tight while Maya drove west on highways that got emptier and lonelier the further they went from the city. The landscape changed gradually, industrial sprawl giving way to dying towns and then to nothing, just scrub brush and rocky hills, and the occasional gas station that looked like it was losing a war with time. Redstone County appeared on road signs around mile marker 140, population 2,400, no services next 50 miles. Maya took the exit and followed Catherine's directions onto smaller roads that turned from asphalt to gravel to dirt. The mine property sat at the end of a private road that wound through hills studded with salt deposits that glittered in the morning sun like broken glass. A chain-link fence surrounded the perimeter, topped with barbed wire and warning signs. No trespassing, condemned property, danger, structural instability, entry prohibited by order of State Mining Commission. Maya parked in front of the gate and sat for a moment, staring at the industrial complex beyond. The main building was massive, 3 stories of corrugated metal and concrete, with broken windows and graffiti covering the lower walls. Behind it rose the elevator housing, a skeletal structure of rusted steel reaching toward the sky like an accusation. Smaller buildings dotted the property, equipment sheds, an office trailer, what looked like living quarters. All of it abandoned, all of it slowly being reclaimed by the desert. "Mommy," Ethan's voice came from the back seat. "Is this the treasure place?" Maya almost laughed. Treasure place, like it was something from a storybook instead of a condemned industrial site that had killed her great-uncle's life. "Yeah, baby, this is it. It looks scary, I know. But sometimes scary places have good things inside. We just have to be brave enough to look. She used the first brass key to open the gate. It swung wide with a squeal of rusted hinges. Maya drove through and parked near the main building, close enough to run back if they needed to, but far enough that Ethan could play outside safely. The office trailer was exactly what she expected. Decades of dust-coating cheap furniture, a desk with paperwork from 1994 still scattered across its surface, filing cabinets with locks rusted shut. A calendar on the wall stopped on November 1994, the month the mine was condemned. Maya found Roland's personal quarters in a converted storage room at the back of the trailer. A narrow cot with military precision corners, a hot plate and mini fridge that didn't work anymore. Books everywhere, stacked on shelves made from cinder blocks and plywood. Mining texts, geology manuals, and, surprisingly, poetry collections. On the desk was a framed photograph. Roland, maybe 40 years old, standing with a woman and a young girl. The woman was laughing, the girl making a silly face. Roland looked happy in a way the old man in Catherine's photo never had. Maya turned the frame over. Written on the back in faded ink, Sarah and Emily, 1979. Before what? Before the mine was condemned? Before whatever happened that turned a happy man into a hermit who spent 30 years guarding secrets. Ethan tugged on Maya's sleeve. Can we go down now, into the mine? Not yet. Let's look around up here first. They explored the surface buildings. The equipment shed held rusted machinery and tools that would probably be valuable to a collector. The generator building was empty except for copper wire that had been stripped out, probably by scavengers who'd broken in over the years. And everywhere there were warning signs, hand-painted, official-looking, desperate, danger, unstable ground, do not enter. Oxygen levels unsafe below 500 feet. Someone had wanted people to stay away. The question was whether that someone was the state authorities or Roland himself. The elevator housing stood at the center of the complex, a metal tower with a cage elevator frozen halfway up the shaft. The doors at the base were chained shut with industrial locks. Maya used the third brass key, and the chains fell away. Inside, the smell hit her first. Damp earth and mineral deposits and something else. The particular scent of deep places that haven't seen sunlight in decades. A metal ladder descended into darkness beside the frozen elevator cage. The rungs were slick with condensation. Ethan peered down. It's really dark, Mommy, I know. That's why we brought flashlights. You ready to be brave? Ethan squared his small shoulders. I'm always brave. Captain and me. Maya checked her phone. No signal. She'd expected that. She shouldered her backpack with supplies and started down the ladder, Ethan following close behind, his small fingers gripping each rung carefully, the way she'd taught him. The descent took forever. Maya counted rungs to distract herself from the claustrophobia of the shaft, from the weight of earth pressing down from all sides. 100 rungs, 200, 300. Her arms ached, her legs shook. Behind her, Ethan's breathing came fast and scared, but he kept going. At 500 feet, they reached a platform. The ladder continued down, but here there was a metal door set into the rock wall. Maya shone her flashlight on it. Stenciled letters read, Level 5, Main Operations. She pushed the door open and stepped into a cavern that made her breath catch. The salt mine wasn't like a coal mine or gold mine she'd seen in movies. The walls weren't rock. They were crystalline salt deposits that glittered in her flashlight beam like diamonds, catching and reflecting light in 1,000 directions. The main tunnel stretched ahead, perfectly straight, wide enough for trucks. Rails for mine carts ran down the center. Support beams held up the ceiling every 20 feet, massive timbers that had turned gray with age, but still looked solid. It's pretty, Ethan whispered, like Elsa's castle. Maya smiled despite her fear. Yeah, baby, it is pretty. They walked deeper into the mine, following the main tunnel. Side passages branched off into darkness, exploratory shafts that Roland's father had dug, searching for the richest salt deposits. Maya ignored them, staying on the main path. After 10 minutes of walking, she found the first sign that Roland had been here recently, a work light attached to a support beam, unpowered now but clearly installed in the last few decades. Then more lights, strung along the tunnel like a path leading somewhere specific. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. This was the main excavation site, where industrial equipment had carved out thousands of tons of salt. The floor here was uneven, scarred with machine tracks. The ceiling rose 40 feet overhead, supported by massive pillars of salt left in place to prevent collapse. And at the far end of the chamber, Maya saw it, a section of wall that looked different from the rest. The salt there was darker, disturbed, with evidence of recent excavation. Someone had been digging. Someone had found something and then carefully hidden it again. Maya approached the wall and ran her hands over the surface. Her fingers found the seam of a door, cleverly concealed, but there if you knew where to look. She pressed, and a section of wall swung inward with a grinding sound that echoed through the chamber. Cold air rushed out, carrying that same mineral smell, but also something else. Ozone, like after a lightning storm. Ethan grabbed Maya's hand. "Do we have to go in there? We came all this way, baby. Let's see what Uncle Roland wanted us to find." The hidden passage was narrow, barely wide enough for Maya's shoulders. She had to walk sideways, her flashlight held ahead. Ethan pressed against her back. The walls here weren't excavated salt. They were natural, twisted and flowing like frozen water, formations that had taken millions of years to create. After 50 feet, the passage opened up. Maya stepped into a chamber that stole her breath and her ability to think rationally. The space was massive, maybe 100 feet across and 60 feet high, and every surface was covered in crystals, not just salt crystals. Something else, something that caught her flashlight beam and exploded it into 1,000 colors. The walls sparkled with purple and blue and green and red, geometric formations growing in intricate patterns that looked more like art than geology. "Mommy," Ethan's voice was full of wonder. "What are they?" Maya didn't know. She'd never seen anything like this. The crystals grew in clusters, some as small as her thumb, others as large as her forearm. They covered the floor, the walls, the ceiling, creating a cave that looked like the inside of a geode. She moved deeper into the chamber, her boots crunching on crystal formations. Along the far wall she found Roland's workstation, a folding table with notebooks and sample containers, a camping chair, battery-powered lights that had long since died, and boxes, dozens of boxes, carefully labeled and dated. Maya opened the first box. Inside were crystal samples, each wrapped in cloth and documented with notes. Amethyst geode, weight 3.2 lbs, estimated value $800. Celestite cluster, weight 5.7 lbs, estimated value $2,400. Fluorite specimen, rare formation, estimated value $60,500. She opened another box. More samples, more notes, more estimates. The numbers climbed. $10,000 for a single crystal, $25,000 for another, $50,000 for a formation so perfect it belonged in a museum. Maya's hands shook as she opened box after box. 47 containers total, each filled with specimens that Roland had carefully harvested and cataloged over decades of secret work. At the bottom of the last box, she found a leather journal. Roland's handwriting covered every page, neat and precise, documenting everything. August 15th, 1987. Found the entrance today while exploring the collapsed eastern shaft. Initially thought it was just another salt formation. Then I saw the colors. September 3rd, 1987. The chamber is extensive. Preliminary assessment suggests rare mineral deposits. Amethyst, celestite, fluorite, possibly others. The formation is unique. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of mining. October 12, 1987. I've been researching. The crystal formations are geologically significant. The combination of minerals in this concentration is almost unheard of. This could be worth millions. November 4th, 1987. I told the state inspector about the chamber today. Thought they'd be excited. Instead, they started asking questions about structural integrity, about whether the excavation made the mine unstable. I got scared, sealed the chamber before they could inspect it, filed paperwork claiming that section of the mine collapsed. December 1987. The mine was condemned today. The inspector said the eastern sections are too unstable to continue operations. I didn't correct him, let him think the collapse story was true. This way the chamber stays hidden, stays mine. Maya read faster, her heart pounding. The entries continued for years. Roland describing his secret work, carefully harvesting specimens, researching their value, planning what he'd do with the money. But he never sold them. Every entry ended the same way. Too risky. Someone might ask questions, might want to see where they came from. Can't risk losing it all. The journal entries grew more paranoid over time. Roland convinced himself that people were watching, that the government knew about the chamber, that they'd take it from him if he wasn't careful. And then the entries from recent years, after Roland learned he was dying. June 2024. Cancer is spreading. Doctor gives me 6 months. I've wasted my life guarding a secret instead of living. The crystals are still here. Still perfect, still worthless because I was too afraid to do anything with them. July 2024. Been thinking about Maya. Her mother sent me photos over the years. I know her ex-husband left. I know she's struggling. She reminds me of Sarah, strong, capable, deserving better than what life gave her. August 2024. Updated my will today, leaving everything to Maya. Maybe she'll be braver than I was. Maybe she'll actually do something with this instead of letting fear turn it into a prison. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before Roland died. They know. 2 men came to the property asking about the mine, about what I found. I didn't tell them anything, but they'll be back. I've hidden the journal where Maya will find it. I've locked the chamber. If she's smart, she'll get everything out before they realize what's here. If she's not, she'll end up like me, afraid and alone and dying with a fortune nobody can touch. Maya closed the journal with shaking hands. The specimens in these boxes were worth millions, but that wasn't all. The chamber itself contained probably hundreds more formations, thousands maybe. An entire cave system filled with rare minerals that Roland had been too paranoid to ever harvest properly. She pulled out her phone to take photos and realized she had no signal. 800 feet underground, surrounded by rock. Of course, there was no signal. Ethan was examining crystals, his small hands gentle on the formations. "Are these the treasure, Mommy?" "Yeah, baby, this is the treasure. Are we rich now?" Maya thought about the eviction notice, about the bills on her kitchen table, about a lifetime of struggle that had led to this moment. Standing in a secret cave her dying great-uncle had left her because he'd been too afraid to use it himself. "Yeah, I think we might be." But even as she said it, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Voices from the main chamber, footsteps echoing through the mine. Someone was coming. Maya grabbed Ethan and pulled him behind a cluster of large crystals, pressing her hand over his mouth. She killed her flashlight and the chamber plunged into darkness. The voices grew louder. 2 men, maybe 3. Their flashlight beams swept through the hidden passage entrance. "You're sure this is the place?" A man's voice, cultured and cold. Kavanaugh's notes said 500 feet down, eastern section. This matches. Another voice, younger, nervous. The old man wouldn't talk, but his paperwork didn't lie. There's something down here, something valuable enough that he spent 30 years hiding it. Flashlight beams entered the crystal chamber. Maya held Ethan tighter, praying he'd stay quiet. Through the crystalline formations, she could see silhouettes. 3 men, all dressed in expensive outdoor gear. One carried something that looked like a weapon, though in the shadows she couldn't be sure. Jesus Christ! The first man's voice was filled with awe. Would you look at this? They spread out, examining the chamber. One of them found Roland's workstation and started going through the boxes. These samples alone are worth millions. Millions just sitting here. The younger man laughed, a sound that had nothing to do with humor, and the old man lived like a hermit, never sold a single piece, because he was scared. The third man spoke for the first time, his voice rough. Scared someone would take it from him. Well, he was right to be scared. What about the heir? The nervous young man again. Lawyer said everything went to a niece. Won't matter. We'll make her an offer. Something generous but not suspicious. She's broke, desperate. She'll take it and walk away grateful. And if she doesn't? Silence. Then the cold voice answered. Then we make sure she doesn't tell anyone what she found down here. Same as the old man. Maya's chest tightened. These were the men who'd visited Roland before he died. The ones who'd given him defensive wounds. They'd killed him, or tried to, for information about the chamber. And now they were here for her. Ethan shifted against Maya, about to make a sound. She clamped her hand tighter over his mouth, her other arm wrapped around his small body. Not yet. Not now. The men spent 20 minutes examining the chamber, taking photos, discussing logistics of excavation and sale. They talked about finding buyers for rare specimens, about keeping the operation quiet, about making sure the property transferred to them before anyone else realized what was here. Finally, they left, their voices fading back down the hidden passage, their lights disappearing into darkness. Maya waited 10 more minutes, counting her heartbeats before she dared to move. When she finally stood, her legs nearly gave out. "We have to go," she whispered to Ethan, "right now." Quickly and quietly. Why are those men here? Because they want to steal what's ours. And we're not going to let them. Maya grabbed Roland's journal and as many small specimens as she could fit in her backpack. Every sample she took was worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands. She was selective, choosing the pieces Roland had marked as most valuable. Then she led Ethan back through the hidden passage into the main excavation chamber. The men were gone, their flashlights no longer visible in the tunnels ahead. Maya and Ethan moved quickly but carefully back toward the elevator shaft. Every sound made Maya's heart jump. Every shadow looked like an ambush. They reached the ladder and started climbing. 500 feet of vertical ladder, with a 6-year-old terrified out of his mind, and a backpack full of crystal specimens worth a fortune. Maya's arms screamed. Her hands slipped on the rungs. Below her, Ethan was crying softly but climbing, always climbing, because he trusted his mother to get them out. They emerged into daylight that felt like an assault after the darkness below. Maya slammed the elevator shaft door behind them and looped the chains back through, locking it with fumbling hands. Mrs. Chen's car was where they'd left it. Maya threw their bags in the back and buckled Ethan into his seat. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine started. Maya reversed, turned, and floored it down the dirt road toward the gate. In her rearview mirror, she saw a black SUV pulling up to the mine entrance. The same vehicle Roland's neighbors had reported seeing before his death. She'd gotten out just in time. Maya drove like a demon was chasing her, because 3 demons were. She didn't slow down until they'd reached the highway, didn't breathe normally until they'd put 50 miles between themselves and the mine. Ethan had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from fear and climbing. Maya's mind raced. She couldn't go back to her apartment. The men knew who she was, knew she'd inherited the mine. They'd find her there. She needed help. She needed someone who understood what was happening and could protect her. She needed Catherine Walsh. Maya drove straight to the address on Catherine's business card. A small office in a strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Not exactly the high-powered law firm Maya had imagined. Catherine looked up from her desk when Maya burst through the door, a crystal specimen wrapped in cloth clutched in her hands. "They're here, the men you warned me about. They were in the mine. They killed Roland, or tried to, and now they're coming for me." Catherine's expression went from surprised to grim. "Close the door, lock it." Maya did. Catherine came around her desk and took the crystal specimen, unwrapping it carefully. When she saw what was inside, her breath caught. Celestite, museum quality, worth at least $15,000. There are dozens more, hundreds maybe, an entire chamber full of them. Maya's words tumbled out. Roland found them in 1987 and sealed the chamber so no one else would know. That's why the mine was condemned. It wasn't unsafe. He made them think it was so they wouldn't explore further. Catherine sat down heavily. "How much do you think is down there? Total value?" Roland's estimates in his journal. Maya pulled out the leather-bound book, added up to over 100 million just in the specimens he'd cataloged. But the chamber is huge. There could be 3 times that much. 347 million. Catherine said the number like a curse. "You inherited 347 million in rare mineral specimens, and 3 men who killed for it know where to find you. What do I do?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Detective Morrison? Catherine Walsh? I need to report a murder." "Yes, I'll hold." She covered the phone. "We're going to do this right. We're going to get police protection, file the proper mining claims, and make sure those men end up in prison where they belong. What if they find me first? Then we make sure you're somewhere they can't reach you." The police came within 30 minutes. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She took Maya's statement, examined the crystal specimens, and read the relevant parts of Roland's journal. "This is a homicide case." She said it like it was simple. "Mr. Kavanaugh died with defensive wounds 3 weeks ago. These men were seen at his property beforehand, and now they're threatening his heir. That's murder, attempted theft, and conspiracy. Can you protect my son? We'll put you both in protective custody until we can make arrests." Morrison stood. "But I need you to understand something, Ms. Reeves. The amount of money we're talking about here, it makes people desperate. These men won't give up easily. I don't care how desperate they are." Maya's voice was steel. "I've been desperate my whole life. The difference is I never tried to kill anyone for it." The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Maya and Ethan were moved to a safe house on the outskirts of the city. 2 officers stationed outside. No phones, no internet, no contact with anyone except Catherine and Detective Morrison. Catherine filed emergency claims with the State Mining Commission, documenting the crystal chamber and establishing Maya's legal right to it. She also filed criminal complaints against the 3 men, naming them based on descriptions Maya provided and evidence Roland had collected. The men turned out to be mineral brokers from Denver. They'd specialized in acquiring rare specimens through, as Catherine put it, creative means. They'd learned about Roland's find through a contact at the State Mining Commission, someone who'd seen the original paperwork from 1987 before Roland had it sealed. They'd visited Roland multiple times before his death, offering increasingly large sums for the mine. When he refused to tell them what was down there, they'd gotten physical. The defensive wounds on Roland's hands and arms told that story. Roland's death certificate said heart failure, but the bruising suggested his heart failed while being interrogated by men who didn't take no for an answer. Detective Morrison got warrants within 24 hours. The three men were arrested at a hotel in Redstone County. Their rooms contained photographs of the crystal chamber, stolen from Roland's property, equipment for illegal mining operations, and communications discussing how to eliminate complications. Eliminate complications meant making sure Maya Reeves never told anyone what she'd inherited. The DA charged them with murder, attempted murder, theft, conspiracy, and about a dozen other crimes. Bail was set at $2 million each. They couldn't pay it. Catherine came to the safe house on the third day with news. The State Mining Commission has completed their preliminary assessment. The crystal chamber is real, extensive, and geologically significant. They're estimating total value at $347 million, possibly more. Maya felt dizzy. That's not real money. That's not possible. It's very real. Catherine pulled out documents. Here's the assessment report. Here's the claim registration in your name. Here's the estimate from 3 independent mineralogists. She paused. Maya, you're one of the wealthiest women in the state now. You just don't have access to it yet. How long until I do? Months, probably. We need to establish security at the mine, hire proper excavation specialists, create a legal structure to handle the sales. This isn't like finding a treasure chest. It's more like inheriting an oil well. The money will come, but it takes time to extract it properly. What do I do until then? Catherine smiled. You accept my loan. I'm advancing you $50,000 against future proceeds. Enough to pay your back rent, get a decent apartment, hire a nanny for Ethan, and stop working jobs that are killing you. I can't accept that. Yes, you can. It's not charity. It's an advance. You'll pay me back plus interest when the first specimens sell. She pushed the loan documents across the table. Let me help you. Roland wanted you to have freedom, not just money. This is how we start. Maya signed with shaking hands. The $50,000 appeared in her account the next morning. She paid her landlord every penny she owed, plus 2 months ahead. She bought Ethan new clothes that fit. She got her teeth fixed, something she'd been putting off for 3 years because she couldn't afford the dental bill. And she quit both her jobs. Walked in, gave notice, and left without looking back. The freedom felt dangerous, like any moment something would come and take it away. But nothing did. The men stayed in jail awaiting trial. The mine stayed sealed and protected by state security. And Maya started the slow process of learning how to be someone who wasn't desperate. The trial came 6 months later. The prosecution had overwhelming evidence. Roland's defensive wounds matching the defendant's hands. Communications discussing elimination of complications. Photos stolen from the mine. Testimony from neighbors who'd seen them visiting Roland. The defense tried to argue that Roland's death was natural, that the subsequent threats against Maya were misunderstandings, that the photos were from legitimate research into purchasing the property. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The lead defendant got life in prison. His accomplices got 40 years each. Judge Adams looked at them from the bench with an expression of disgust. You murdered an old man for information about money you had no right to. You threatened a young mother and her son. You corrupted public officials and destroyed evidence. I've seen many criminals in my years on this bench, but your combination of greed and callousness is extraordinary. He turned to Maya, who sat in the gallery with Ethan and Catherine. Ms. Reeves, I hope you use your inheritance more wisely than these men used their freedom. Maya nodded, unable to speak around the relief choking her throat. The excavation began in the spring. Maya hired a company that specialized in rare mineral recovery. She worked with geologists and mineralogists to catalog everything in the chamber. She established protocols to ensure specimens were harvested without damaging the formations. The first major sale came 8 months after Roland's death. A purple amethyst geode weighing 847 pounds sold to a museum for $2.7 million. The second sale was a celestite cluster to a private collector for $1.9 million. Then a fluorite specimen for $800,000. A rare blue salt formation for $1.2 million. The money accumulated in accounts Maya could barely believe were real. $10 million in the first year, $40 million in the second. By the third year, they'd excavated enough to reach $150 million in total sales. And the chamber still wasn't empty. The formations kept going deeper into the mountain, revealing new wonders with every carefully removed stone. Maya invested carefully. She bought a house, nothing extravagant, just 3 bedrooms with a yard for Ethan in a good school district. She set up a trust for Ethan's education. She paid off every debt she'd ever had, then started helping others. The Maya Reeves Foundation launched with a simple mission: help single parents escape poverty. It provided emergency housing, job training, childcare assistance, and small business loans. Everything Maya had wished existed when she was working 3 jobs and still falling behind. She hired a staff of people who'd been through similar struggles. She opened facilities in 3 cities. She helped hundreds of families in the first year, thousands in the second. And she went back to the mine, not to excavate, to remember. She stood in the crystal chamber with Ethan, now 9 years old, and looked at the formations glittering in the light. Uncle Roland could have sold all this, Ethan said, could have been rich his whole life. Why didn't he? Because he was scared. Maya's voice was soft, scared someone would take it from him. So he hid down here and guarded it and died alone without ever enjoying what he found. That's sad. Yeah, baby, it is. That's why we're different. We're not going to hide what we have. We're going to use it to help people, to make sure other families don't have to be as scared and desperate as we were. Ethan nodded, solemn beyond his years. I think Uncle Roland would like that. I think so too. They climbed back to the surface together. The mine was fully operational now, employing 30 people for excavation and processing. The condemned signs were gone, replaced with proper safety equipment and protocols. Maya had even reopened the surface buildings. Roland's old trailer became a museum documenting the mine's history. The equipment shed was now a visitors center where school groups came to learn about geology and minerals. And in Roland's personal quarters, Maya had kept everything exactly as he left it. The photograph of Sarah and Emily, the poetry books, the single chair where he'd sit and write in his journal about treasures he was too afraid to share, a memorial to a man who'd given her everything by showing her what happened when fear controlled your life. Maya visited Catherine's office on the anniversary of inheriting the mine. She brought a check for $50,000 plus interest, payment in full for the loan that had saved her life. Catherine pushed the check back across her desk. Keep it. Donate it to the foundation. That's what Roland would want. You don't know what Roland would want. Maya smiled. You never met him. No, but I know what you want. And watching you build something beautiful from his fear, that's payment enough. Maya left the check on Catherine's desk anyway. Some debts needed to be paid, not because anyone required it, but because it mattered to remember where you came from. That evening, Maya attended a fundraiser for the foundation. 200 people packed into a hotel ballroom, all of them there to support the mission of helping desperate families find hope. She stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. Ethan sat in the front row, grinning. Catherine was there. Detective Morrison. Dorothy from the Protective Custody Safe House. Frank, the geologist who'd authenticated the first specimens. Dozens of families who'd been helped by the foundation. their lives transformed by the same fortune that had almost destroyed her. 2 years ago, Maya began. I was 3 months behind on rent for a one-bedroom apartment. I worked 60 hours a week and still couldn't make ends meet. I was being evicted, and I didn't know how I'd keep my son fed and housed. Then a stranger gave me a gift. Not just money, but a chance. A condemned mine that everyone said was worthless. A secret chamber that everyone said didn't exist. And the trust that I could be brave enough to claim it. Her voice strengthened. I'm not brave because I inherited money. Money doesn't make you brave. I am brave because I had to be. Because my son needed me to be. Because survival required it. And everyone in this room who's struggled, who's worked impossible hours for impossible goals, who's been told they don't deserve better, you're brave too. You just need someone to see it. That's what this foundation does. It sees you. It says you deserve better. It gives you the same chance a dying man gave me. Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying. The applause was thunderous. Maya stepped away from the podium feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd paid her debt to Roland. She'd honored his gift. She'd turned fear into hope and a secret into a legacy. Ethan ran up and hugged her waist. Mom, you were amazing. You think so? I know so. He pulled back, his young face serious. Can I go down in the mine again sometime? I want to see the chamber where you found the crystals. Someday, when you're older and can appreciate what it means. I appreciate it now. Maya laughed and ruffled his hair. Then yeah, we'll go together. And I'll tell you the whole story about Uncle Roland who was too scared to live, and your mom who was too stubborn to die, and the treasure that saved us both. They walked out of the fundraiser into a perfect evening. The city lights sparkled like crystals, like the fortune hidden 800 feet below ground that had changed everything. Maya Reeves, who'd once been nobody, was now someone who mattered, not because of money, but because of what she'd chosen to do with it. She'd taken a dead man's secret and turned it into thousands of families' salvation. She'd transformed fear into freedom, desperation into hope, and a condemned mine into a beacon of possibility. And somewhere, she liked to think, Roland Kavanaugh was finally at peace. His secret was out. His treasure was being used. His fear had been replaced by a woman who knew that bravery wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to keep moving forward despite it. The single mother who'd been evicted was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who'd crawled 800 feet underground to claim what was hers, someone who'd faced down killers and won, someone who proved that when the world said you were worthless, sometimes you just needed to dig deeper to find the truth. Maya looked up at the stars and smiled. Thank you, she whispered to a man she'd never met. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for being brave enough to give me what you couldn't use yourself. I promise I won't waste it. And she hadn't. The $347 million fortune built by crystals growing in the dark for millions of years was now light for people stumbling through their own darkness. The mine that had been Roland's prison had become Maya's foundation for freedom. Some treasures were measured in dollars, but the real treasure was the courage to claim what you deserved, the wisdom to use it well, and the grace to help others find their own way out of the dark. Maya Reeves had found all three, and she was just getting started. 5 years after inheriting the mine, Maya stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., not because she had to work 3 jobs, but because she wanted to watch the sunrise from her home office. The difference between having to and wanting to was everything. Ethan was 11 now, sleeping peacefully in his room down the hall. His walls were covered with posters of scientists and explorers, not because Maya had pushed him toward any particular interest, but because he'd spent so much time at the mine that geology had become his passion. He talked about studying mineralogy in college, about discovering his own crystal chambers someday. Maya smiled at the thought. Her son had options now, real options, not just survival, but actual choices about what kind of life he wanted to build. The doorbell rang at 6:30, early enough to make Maya's heart skip. She still had that reflex, that fear that someone was coming to take it all away. But when she opened the door, she found Catherine Walsh holding 2 cups of coffee and a manila envelope. "You're up early," Maya said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "So are you." Old habits. Catherine followed her inside, settling at the kitchen table like she'd done dozens of times over the past 5 years. "Something like that." Maya sat across from her. "What's in the envelope?" Catherine's expression shifted, mixing excitement with something that looked like concern. "I've been doing research about Roland, about why he really sealed that chamber. We know why. He was paranoid, scared someone would take it. That's what I thought too. But I found something." Catherine pulled out old newspaper clippings, letters, court documents. Roland Kavanaugh wasn't always a hermit. In 1979, he had a wife and daughter, Sarah and Emily. Maya remembered the photograph in Roland's trailer. Before there was an accident, Catherine's voice went gentle. A car crash on the highway near the mine. Sarah and Emily were killed instantly. The investigation revealed that the brakes had been tampered with. Maya's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Someone murdered them. It was never proven, but Roland believed it. He'd recently announced that he'd found significant mineral deposits in the mine. He was planning to go public, to sell the mining rights to a major corporation for $12 million. Catherine laid out more documents. 3 days before the contract was supposed to be signed, his family died. Who would have wanted to stop the sale? His business partners. 2 men who owned 30% of the mining operation. If Roland sold to the corporation, they'd be bought out at a fraction of what they thought they deserved. They wanted to hold out for more money. Roland wanted to cash out and retire with his family. Catherine pulled out police reports. The brake tampering was traced to a mechanic shop owned by one of the partners' brothers, but there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. Roland dropped all charges, canceled the sale, and disappeared into the mine. He never spoke to anyone again. He wasn't paranoid, Maya whispered. He was traumatized and guilty. Catherine met her eyes. Roland blamed himself for his family's death. He thought if he'd never found those minerals, if he'd never talked about selling them, Sarah and Emily would still be alive. So he sealed the chamber, hid the wealth, and spent the next 30 years making sure no one else died because of what was down there. Maya felt tears on her cheeks. He gave it to me because he thought I was strong enough to handle it. But he was really giving me what killed his family. No. Catherine gripped her hand. He gave it to you because he knew you wouldn't make his mistakes. You wouldn't let fear control you. You wouldn't hide it. You'd use it to help people, which is exactly what he should have done but couldn't because grief destroyed him. Does anyone else know this about Sarah and Emily? The business partners are both dead now. The story died with them. Catherine closed the folder. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the full truth about what Roland gave you. It wasn't just money. It was his burden, and you've transformed it into something beautiful, something that would make Sarah and Emily proud. Maya sat in silence for a long time, processing. All those years she'd thought Roland was a broken old man, too scared to live. He wasn't scared. He was grieving. He'd lost everything that mattered and convinced himself the wealth was cursed. But Maya had proven him wrong. She'd taken the same fortune that had destroyed his family and used it to save hundreds of other families. She'd broken the curse by refusing to let fear win. I want to do something, Maya said finally, for Sarah and Emily, something that honors them. Catherine smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 2 months later, Maya stood at the mine entrance with a crowd of over 200 people. Media crews, local officials, families who'd been helped by the foundation, and Ethan beside her holding a shovel. The sign above them read, "The Sarah and Emily Kavanaugh Center for Scientific Education." Maya had converted the old mine buildings into an educational facility. The crystal chamber itself would remain sealed, protected as a geological wonder. But the upper levels had been transformed into classrooms, laboratories, and exhibition spaces where students could learn about geology, mineralogy, and the earth sciences. The center offered free programs for underprivileged children, full scholarships for students interested in pursuing science careers, summer camps where kids could explore caves and examine rock formations and discover that the earth beneath their feet was full of wonders. It was funded entirely by the crystal sales. Maya had earmarked $50 million specifically for the center's endowment, ensuring it would operate in perpetuity. As she prepared to give her speech, Maya saw movement at the back of the crowd. An elderly woman, maybe 85, being helped forward by a younger woman who looked to be her daughter. Catherine appeared at Maya's elbow. That's Margaret Wells. She was Sarah Kavanaugh's best friend. When she heard about the center, she insisted on coming. Maya stepped down from the platform and approached Margaret. The elderly woman's eyes were sharp despite her age, taking in every detail of the facility. "You're Maya Reeves," Margaret said, "Roland's heir." "Yes, ma'am. He talked about you, you know, in those final weeks." Margaret's voice wavered. "I was one of the few people he'd still speak to. I'd visit once a month, bring him groceries. He told me about the chamber, about what he'd found, about how he was leaving it to someone who might be brave enough to actually use it." "Did he talk about Sarah and Emily?" "Every conversation." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "He never stopped loving them, never stopped blaming himself. I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, that grief wasn't a life sentence, but he wouldn't listen." She reached out and took Maya's hand with surprising strength. "But this," she gestured at the center, "this would have made Sarah so happy." She was a teacher, taught earth science at the local high school. She believed every child deserved to understand the world they lived in. Maya's throat tightened. "I didn't know that. Roland probably didn't put it in his letters. Too painful. But I'm telling you now so you know that what you've built here, it's not just honoring their memory, it's continuing Sarah's life's work." The ceremony was beautiful. Local officials praised Maya's vision. Students from the first scholarship program spoke about how the center had changed their dreams. Catherine gave a brief history of the mine, carefully edited to focus on discovery rather than tragedy. And then Maya spoke, her voice carrying across the crowd. "5 years ago, I inherited a condemned mine from a man I never met. Everyone told me it was worthless, dangerous, a burden I should sell as quickly as possible for whatever I could get." She paused, looking at the facility that had risen from those condemned buildings. But Roland Kavanaugh knew something they didn't. He knew that beneath the fear and the warnings and the rust, there was something extraordinary. Not just crystals, not just money, but possibility. Maya's voice grew stronger. Roland spent 30 years guarding a secret because he was afraid of losing more than he already had. He lost his wife Sarah and his daughter Emily to violence born from greed. And he spent the rest of his life making sure that same greed wouldn't destroy anyone else. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. But grief can be a prison just like fear can. Roland locked himself away, convinced that protecting the treasure meant hiding it. What he didn't realize was that the real treasure wasn't in the chamber. It was in what that chamber could become if someone was brave enough to share it. She looked directly at Margaret. Sarah Kavanaugh was a teacher. She believed in education, in giving children tools to understand their world. This center is her legacy as much as Roland's. Every student who walks through these doors, every scholarship granted, every discovery made, That's Sarah's life continuing forward. Maya turned back to the crowd, and Emily, who never got the chance to grow up, to discover her passions, to become who she was meant to be, she lives on in every child who comes here and falls in love with science, who looks at a rock and sees a story millions of years old, who understands that the earth beneath our feet is full of wonders if we're just brave enough to look. She held up the ceremonial scissors. This center isn't built on tragedy. It's built on transformation, on taking what was lost and making it found, on taking what was hidden and bringing it into light, on proving that fortune isn't about how much you have, but what you choose to do with it. The ribbon cutting was met with thunderous applause. As the crowd filed into the facility for tours, Margaret approached Maya one more time. "Roland chose well," she said simply. "Sarah would have loved you." Those words meant more than any amount of money ever could. That evening, after the crowds had left and the facility was quiet, Maya took Ethan down into the upper levels of the mine. Not to the sealed chamber, but to a new section they'd opened specifically for the center. A safe, well-lit tunnel that showcased the beauty of salt formations without the danger of deep excavation. They walked together through walls that glittered like stars, Ethan's hand in hers. "Mom, do you ever wish Uncle Roland had just sold everything when he first found it? That he'd taken the money and lived a happy life with his family?" "Every day," Maya admitted. "But then I remember that if he had, I wouldn't have inherited it. Hundreds of families wouldn't have been helped. This center wouldn't exist." Sometimes tragedy leads to something beautiful, not because the tragedy was necessary, but because someone decided to transform it. Do you think he's happy now? Wherever he is? Maya thought about a man who'd spent 30 years in darkness, guarding a secret that slowly killed him. A man who'd lost everything that mattered and decided his pain could become someone else's salvation. "Yeah, baby, I think he's finally at peace." They emerged into the evening air just as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple. The mine that had been Roland's prison was now a beacon of hope. The chamber that had been sealed in fear was now protected in love. The fortune that had cost Sarah and Emily their lives was now saving others. Maya had done more than inherit money. She'd inherited pain and fear and decades of grief. And she'd transformed all of it into something that would outlast her, that would keep growing and changing lives long after she was gone. The next morning brought a visitor Maya hadn't expected. A young woman, maybe 23, with Sarah, Kavanaugh's dark eyes and determined chin. "My name is Rebecca Thurston," she said when Maya answered the door. "Margaret Wells is my grandmother. She told me about you, about the center, about what you've done with Uncle Roland's inheritance." Maya invited her in, curiosity mixing with caution. "I didn't know Sarah had any living relatives. She doesn't." Rebecca settled on the couch, her hands twisting nervously. "I'm Emily's daughter." Maya's world tilted. "Emily died in 1979. You can't be more than 23. Emily didn't die in that crash." Rebecca's voice shook. "That's what everyone thought, what Uncle Roland thought, but she survived." Maya sat down heavily. "That's impossible. The police reports said both Sarah and Emily were killed. Emily was in a coma for 6 months. When she woke up, she had severe brain damage, no memory of her previous life. She was only 9 years old." Rebecca pulled out documents, medical records, court papers. The state put her in foster care under a new identity for her protection. They thought whoever tampered with the brakes might come after her if they knew she survived. Why didn't anyone tell Roland? They tried. But by then he'd disappeared into the mine, refused all contact. The social workers sent letters, made calls, even came to the property. He never responded. Eventually, they gave up. Emily grew up thinking she was an orphan, never knowing her real father spent 30 years grieving her. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. On her deathbed, A social worker finally told her the truth about who she was, about Sarah and Roland and the accident. But by then Roland was dead too. They never got to reunite. Maya felt like she'd been punched all those years. They could have had each other. I know, Rebecca wiped her eyes, but I'm here because my mother wanted me to find you. In her final days, she learned about the inheritance, about what you were doing with the foundation and the education center. She made me promise I'd come meet you and tell you that she forgave him. Forgave Roland for not saving her, for spending his life in grief instead of searching for her. She understood why he did it, and she wanted you to know that what you've built, the center named after her and my grandmother, it means everything. It's the life she would have wanted to live if she'd gotten the chance. Rebecca pulled out a photograph. Emily as an adult, smiling, surrounded by children. She became a teacher too, just like my grandmother. Taught elementary school for 20 years. Helped hundreds of kids learn to read and write and believe in themselves. Maya looked at the photograph and saw Sarah's features, Roland's determined expression, a life that had continued despite unimaginable trauma. "What do you want from me?" Maya asked gently. "If this is about money, about claiming part of the inheritance, I'll work with you." "Your family." Rebecca shook her head. "I don't want money. I want to work for the foundation." She met Maya's eyes. "I'm a social worker specializing in foster children. I've seen what poverty does to families, how it breaks them apart. What you're doing, helping single parents, giving kids opportunities, that's what my mother would have dedicated her life to if she'd known who she was." Maya studied the young woman in front of her, Sarah's granddaughter, Emily's daughter, the continuation of a family tree that everyone thought had ended in 1979. "The foundation could use someone with your experience," Maya said slowly. "We're expanding our programs for children in foster care. I'd be honored to have you join us." Rebecca's relief was palpable. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for listening, for not treating me like I'm trying to steal something." "You're not stealing anything. You're reclaiming your family's legacy." Maya reached across and took Rebecca's hand. "And you're helping me understand that what Roland gave me wasn't just money. It was a second chance for the Kavanaugh family to matter, to make a difference, to prove that tragedy doesn't have to be the end of the story." Over the next 6 months, Rebecca became an integral part of the foundation. She developed programs specifically for children aging out of foster care, providing them with housing, job training, and emotional support. She worked with Maya to create mentorship programs connecting successful adults who'd overcome poverty with children currently struggling. And she brought something else to the foundation: perspective. Rebecca understood that Maya wasn't just helping strangers. She was healing wounds that had festered for generations. The foundation wasn't charity. It was transformation on a massive scale, breaking cycles of poverty and trauma that had destroyed too many families. One evening, Maya and Rebecca sat in Roland's old trailer, now preserved as part of the center's museum. The photograph of Sarah and Emily hung on the wall, but now there was a second photo beside it. Emily as an adult with her daughter Rebecca, the family tree continuing forward instead of ending in tragedy. "Do you think he knows?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Uncle Roland, do you think wherever he is, he knows Emily survived, that his family line didn't end?" Maya looked at the photographs, at the educational center visible through the window, at the life that had been built from loss. "I think he knows, and I think he's finally forgiven himself." The foundation's reach expanded every year. By year 7, they were operating in 15 states, helping over 10,000 families annually. The education center was serving 5,000 students. The Crystal Chamber had generated over $280 million in sales, with projections suggesting another $67 million worth of specimens still waiting to be carefully harvested. Maya had become something she never imagined, a philanthropist, a business leader, a voice for people who'd been invisible for too long. She gave speeches at conferences, consulted with government officials on poverty, programs, and appeared in magazines not because she was rich, but because she was doing something meaningful with that wealth. But the most important role she played was still just being mom to Ethan. Her son was 13 now, thriving in private school, but never forgetting where they'd come from. He volunteered at the foundation every weekend, helping with childcare for parents attending job training programs. He tutored younger kids in math and science. He'd taken the trauma of their early years and turned it into empathy instead of bitterness. One Saturday, as they worked together at the foundation's community center, Ethan looked up from the homework he was helping a 7-year-old complete. "Mom, do you ever miss it? The before, I mean. When it was just us against the world." Maya thought about 3 jobs and an eviction notice, about eating crackers for dinner so Ethan could have the last can of soup, about the bone-deep exhaustion of working 60 hours a week and still falling behind. "No, baby, I don't miss that. But I'm grateful for it." Why? Because it taught me that money isn't what makes you strong. You were strong before the mine, before the crystals, before any of this. Maya gestured at the bustling community center around them. The money just gave you the freedom to show the world what you were always capable of. Ethan thought about this. Is that why you make everyone who works here tell their story, about where they came from? Exactly, Maya smiled. Because when you've been poor, when you've been desperate, when you've been told you're worthless, you never forget, and you make sure you never make anyone else feel that way. "I don't ever want to forget," Ethan said seriously. "Even when I'm older and all this feels normal, I want to remember being 6 years old and scared we'd be homeless. Then you'll be a better man for it." The final vindication came on a Tuesday morning, 8 years after Maya had inherited the mine. She received a call from the governor's office. The state wanted to present her with the Humanitarian Award, the highest civilian honor for her work with the foundation. The ceremony was held at the state capitol. Maya wore a simple blue dress, nothing extravagant. Ethan stood beside her in a suit he'd picked out himself, looking far more mature than his 14 years. The governor, a woman in her 60s who'd grown up poor herself, spoke about how Maya's work had transformed thousands of lives, about how the foundation had become a model for anti-poverty programs nationwide, about how one woman's courage to claim her inheritance had created ripples that would be felt for generations. But it was the next speaker who made Maya's throat close up with emotion. Margaret Wells, now 87, being helped to the podium by Rebecca. "I knew 3 remarkable women in my life," Margaret said, her voice still strong despite her age. Sarah Kavanaugh, who believed every child deserved an education. Emily Kavanaugh, who survived impossible trauma to dedicate her life to helping others. And Maya Reeves, who took a dead man's burden and transformed it into hope for thousands. She looked directly at Maya. "Roland gave you money, but you gave him redemption. You proved that his fear and grief didn't have to be the end of his story. That tragedy could become triumph if someone was brave enough to try." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Maya stood there feeling the weight of 8 years, of struggles and victories and the slow transformation from desperate single mother to someone who mattered on a scale she'd never imagined. That evening, Maya took Ethan back to the mine one last time, before the crystal chamber was permanently sealed. They'd harvested everything that could be safely removed. What remained would be preserved forever as a geological wonder, available for scientists to study, but never to exploit. They stood at the entrance to the hidden passage, looking into the chamber that sparkled like a cathedral built by time itself. "Are you sad it's over?" Ethan asked. "The excavation, I mean." "No," Maya said. Because it's not over, it's just beginning. Every family we help, every child who gets an education, every person who escapes poverty, that's the real treasure. This chamber was just the key that unlocked it. She pulled out a small crystal, one of the first specimens she'd harvested 8 years ago. She'd kept it as a reminder, carrying it in her pocket through every speech, every board meeting, every moment when she felt like she didn't belong in rooms full of powerful people. She handed it to Ethan. This is yours now. To remember that sometimes the things people say are worthless turn out to be exactly what you needed. That condemned can become celebrated. That one person's secret can become everyone's salvation. Ethan held the crystal up, watching it catch and refract the light. I'm going to give it to my daughter someday and tell her about her grandmother who was brave enough to go 800 feet underground in the dark because she knew there was something worth finding. Maya pulled her son close, this boy who'd grown up watching his mother work herself to death and then transform into someone who could help others avoid the same fate. They sealed the chamber behind them, setting the explosives that would close the passage forever. The crystal formations would remain, growing slowly in the dark for another 1,000,000 years, but they'd never be disturbed again. As Maya and Ethan drove away from the mine for the last time, Maya looked back at the facility that had become the Sarah and Emily Kavanaugh Center for Scientific Education. Lights glowed in every window. Students were in evening classes. Teachers were preparing tomorrow's lessons. Lives were being changed. Roland Kavanaugh had spent 30 years hiding in that mine, convinced his fortune was cursed. He'd died alone, never knowing his daughter had survived, never learning that his granddaughter existed, never understanding that his grief, while justified, had stolen decades he could have spent living. But Maya had taken everything Roland couldn't face and turned it into something beautiful. She'd honored Sarah by educating children. She'd honored Emily by helping foster kids. She'd honored Roland by proving that wealth wasn't a curse. It was simply a tool, and what mattered was how you chose to use it. The girl who'd once worked 3 jobs and couldn't pay rent was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd claimed her inheritance despite everyone saying it was worthless, who'd faced down killers and won, who'd transformed 347 million in crystals into hope for tens of thousands of people. Maya Reeves had inherited more than a condemned mine. She'd inherited a choice: to let fear control her the way it had controlled Roland, or to be brave enough to build something that mattered. She'd chosen bravery, and in doing so, she'd finally set Roland free. As they drove toward home, toward the life Maya had built from nothing, Ethan fell asleep with the crystal clutched in his hand. Maya looked at her son and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. They'd survived. More than survived. They'd thrived. And they'd made sure thousands of others could do the same. The condemned salt mine was sealed forever, but its legacy would continue growing, spreading, touching lives in ways Roland Kavanaugh never could have imagined when he'd hidden his fortune in the dark all those years ago. Sometimes the greatest treasures weren't found in chambers 800 feet underground. Sometimes they were built one family at a time, one scholarship at a time, one second chance at a time, by people brave enough to believe that everyone deserved better than the hand life had dealt them. Maya Reeves had found her treasure, and in doing so, she'd become someone else's treasure too, living proof that one person with courage and compassion could change the world. The mine was sealed, but the story was just beginning. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.